Hi, this is Liam Conroy. I just wanted to take you all through my personal introduction for educational leadership based on some of the readings that we had for opening up this unit. So, personal demographics, just looking at myself. I am a high school science teacher teaching biology related classes for all high school grades. As far as kind of my cultural background, as far as where I moved around from, I'm not a native Kansan. I was raised by my parents who are from Connecticut. While living in Kentucky, I moved there at a very young age. And then during my adult years, I had moved between Florida and Kansas, and I've only really lived here for about the last maybe 5 or 6 years of my life. So Kansas is still relatively new to me. As far as categories that I would fit into, I'd say I'm cisgender, straight, able-bodied, white male, 34 years old, fluent in English only, which, again, coming from a lot of privilege, it maybe makes it a little bit harder to relate to some students, but I do try to do my best with accounting for that and being aware of that. As far as the work environment itself, I teach at an alternative high school in Topeka, Kansas. Those are some of my students in my horticulture class there, working on a project to help do some kind of cleanup in one of the parks that's part of our park system. To kind of give an idea for what our alternative high school focuses on, we work with students with specific needs, mostly ones that didn't fit into a traditional classroom setting. So truancy issues are very common. Sometimes the students may be pregnant or parents to children. They may be economically disadvantaged or working to support their family. A lot of them are English language learners. Some of them have specific learning disabilities or IEPs that are utilized within their classroom settings. Many of them have anxiety issues to where larger classrooms are just a little bit overwhelming for them. And some of them have unique situations as far as their relationship to their family, in which they may be emancipated minors, or they may be dealing with homelessness, to where they may not really have a steady area that they consider home or the same family support net that a lot of students have. I work with a smaller staff overall, only 3 teachers in my department. As far as just miscellaneous info, I worked as a zookeeper at the zoo here in town prior to the transition to teaching program. And I had also worked with behavioral health for children ages 6 to 18 years prior to that. So we're looking over Moore's Mindsets of an Educational Leader and some of my takes on some of these things. So these were my interpretations. Number 1 there, all students can learn and grow. So again, rigor is important regardless of the student. Number 2, social capital and teamwork will always outperform individual talent. Research supports that teachers should be collaborating. What I think one should consider in this case is limits with certain personality types. If you have a lot of people who are a little bit overbearing as far as collaboration is concerned, and they tend to put down other teachers, that may be something that is needed to be reined in a little bit as far as looking at those pieces. Happiness is a choice. Performing well at a job alone does not cause someone to be happy by itself. Optimism going into the job itself can greatly benefit performance. I definitely agree with that statement. It's part of why I left my last job, actually, is to not be happy in the midst of it. Dispositions of an educational leader, again, these are more things that are put forward by Moore. Confidence, a leader has to be willing to put their ideas out there, even if they're going to be unpopular, provided they benefit the students in terms of educational leadership. Risk taker, a decisive. This doesn't mean taking decisions recklessly, which is something that I would always caution against, but I'm supportive of the fact that this involves taking calculated risks that are opportunities to learn, even if they aren't successful. It's good to try new things. Having a sense of humor. This mostly seemed to translate to the ability to work smoothly with others and not becoming overwhelmed by stressful situations. Humor helps with those types of situations. Being empathetically assertive, effective leaders are able to interpret the emotions of others, reinforcing those who are following their lead and assisting those who have difficulty with adjusting. Being a learner, leaders in education need to stay current with effective pedagogy practices and share them with their staff. Moore also gives practices of an educational leader. Focusing and prioritizing, educational leaders are able to keep goals simple to help with their implementation and not getting caught up in minor details. So again, if we think of the KISS method and things like that, just making sure that it's not overly complicated so everyone can be on board. Examining feedback and data. Leaders gather data and feedback from teachers in their schools, specifically data with an effective intent to help create positive change in the school. So again, picking selective data that's really going to be very beneficial. Emotional intelligence. Significant effort must be put into effectively interacting with all coworkers to help give them the best chance to rise to the occasion of overcoming the challenges present in a school system. And now we're looking a little bit more at some of the principles that Lynch had put forward, principles of an educational leader. Personal courage, in the same vein that leaders must be able to present unpopular opinions to help students, like we mentioned earlier, they can also stand against otherwise popular ideas that do not have the student's best interest at heart. The ability to say no to specific things, even if they're very popular. Public interest ahead of self. Decisions should always be made for the benefit of the majority, not just the leader. Self-control, self-discipline, and integrity. Leaders need to conduct themselves ethically, and by extension serve as an example to their coworkers, again modeling for others. Task and employee-centeredness. There should always be a focus on benefiting both staff and students in a school. The challenge is finding balances between the different needs of both groups. So, to critique my own implementation of these practices, part of what I can acknowledge with these skills, they're mostly related to positions of higher authority, principals especially, which I am not currently at that level, and it's not my aspiration at this time, but of course I didn't think 5 years ago that I would be teaching in the first place, so obviously things could change in the future. I do think these ideas are critical to create an effective culture of learning. In particular, my role in an alternative high school requires a great degree of flexibility and the pursuit of equity. What I will say is that sometimes I have misgivings when some changes come into play. Our district has in particular focused a lot on visual learning now, and a lot of people were kind of hesitant to implement it or to try and just refigure out how to continue doing what they were doing and label it as visual learning still. So I will admit that I too was a little bit hesitant, influenced by my peers somewhat, but I did try to give it a good faith effort, and I do think that having done that, it was beneficial overall to the way that things carried out. So how does this all affect my school? Because our student body is fully composed of students who are unable to perform well in a traditional school setting, it's perhaps more imperative that our school leaders exhibit some of the aforementioned qualities to help best serve our student population and their families. Again, just thinking a little bit more outside of the box. I will always do my best with my job position to provide adequate and timely feedback to help our school progress. Should I find myself in a leadership position of some kind, I hope I can rise to the occasion of being more open and accepting of some concepts at onset rather than over time. These, of course, are the two works cited for this particular section, the reading that we had for this, and I apologize for getting a little bit over time there, but thank you very much for listening to my presentation.